Well, hello everybody and welcome. Welcome back to a Flight Simulation Association webinar special live presentation that we have going on with Kevin from Pilot Edge talking all about SimVenture 2024. I will be getting into that in just a couple of moments, but before we do that, gosh, it's been quite a couple of weeks here at Flight Sim Association, wherever here is in the world that we have, of course. And of course, many of you may have been to Flight Sim Expo. If you are watching and you're in the chat and you were at Flight Sim Expo, let me know. Post a message on the FSA webinar chat if you're watching there in the Flight Sim Association Discord or on YouTube on Pilot Edge or Flight Sim Association, wherever you're watching. If you came to Flight Sim Expo, let me know. If you didn't come to Flight Sim Expo, hopefully you wanted to. You can let me know that too. As you may know, our next year's show is less than a year away now, coming up in Providence in June 27th to 29, 2025. Just outside of Boston, 45, 60-minute drive from Logan International Airport, or you can fly right into Providence, take the train, all kinds of fun ways to get there. Now, I went right from Flight Sim Expo in Las Vegas to the Quinty International Air Show at CFB Trenton. There were more than, I think, 50,000 people. The Snowbirds performed, a bunch of other large-scale air show type things happening. But one of the many things that we were doing there is we did this live flight simulation demo center. We had a tent. We had 4 sims running, Microsoft Flight Sim and X-Plane. We were doing 737 landings. We were doing the Hudson scenario with Sully, courtesy of our good friends at FS Academy, and just a bunch of other cool stuff, trying to get pilots who are aware of Flight Sim but maybe haven't ever tried it a little more experience actually getting into the simulator. And then on top of that, we were also working with a number of kids and even some of the older kids who had really never gotten any experience with the sim, just to try to give people that little bit of, what is Flight Sim all about. So that was a ton of fun. It's been an absolute whirlwind, so it's nice to finally be back home for one day. I'll be back to work my real job tomorrow, which I think is going to feel like a nice break after these last couple weeks. I'm sure many of you also had some crazy travel plans, the Vegas weather and the heat and just generally some of the storms that happened right after Flight Sim Expo. Heard a few interesting stories, but it's always fun when you get like 2,000 plus flight simmers in the same place because everyone's always talking about their travel stories, and we hear lots about that. Good to see you again, Nunzio. Thanks for jumping on with us today. And of course, in addition to like Flight Sim Expo and everything that we've all had, then on top of that, the sim community's been pretty busy. We had the 777 get released, the MD-11 get released within like 2 weeks of each other. And so it was on VATSIM last night, and it's like every other transmission you're putting heavy on there, otherwise you're doing something wrong. So it almost feels a little bit like one of those big events where everyone's flying heavies again as they kind of get used to seeing some of those new aircraft. So that was exciting for the Flight Sim community, and lots of other cool stuff, of course, came out at Flight Sim Expo. And if you are new, by the way, to like online air traffic control, this will be a nice little intro to Pilot Edge, which is one of a few different ways that you can connect with real human air traffic controllers, get that into your flight simulator. You can actually see other aircraft. You can talk to the controllers using your headset. And it's a really nice way to add some immersion to what you're already doing in the flight sim world. So I think with that in mind, I will kick things off in our SimVenture 2024 notice review. I've got a quick video just to give you a sense as to what this is all about, and then after that I will bring on Kevin from Pilot Edge to talk everything through. But for now, have a quick look at this.
Welcome to Oshkosh, SimVenture's beautiful day here at the Oshkosh Regional Airport at Whitman Field. The altimeter is 2992, the wind is calm, the feeling and visibility are limited. We'll pick you up by 9 colors, come off the railroad track.
Rock your way.
Runway 7, a good rock. I'm going to put you on runway 36 right, runway 36 right, clear to land on the red square.
A right turn eastbound now. Start that right turn eastbound. You're going to 18. Follow that east-west road. Good job. Oh, you the man.
Second aircraft, runway 36 left, clear for takeoff. Right turn 150, right or below 1,300.
Follow railroad, runway 27, down on the side of the gravel pit, March on 18.5. Turn the base, crank it around, crank it. Start that right turn for me right now. Crank it around. We're going to aim for the orange dot, and we're going to keep it airborne to the green.
White and black, straight, fast. Pass the guy ahead and off your left, then gear down, slow down.
You're clear to land at or beyond the blue dot on 18 right. Start your base turn now.
White Cessna, turn right for the downwind. You're flying to Brown Cessna, wing up right base. Greg Grumman, turn your base now. Tight turn all the way around to the green dot.
Crank it. I need you to point at that orange dot. I need you to go right to the orange dot. Harder. Keep it airborne until you're on the green dot and set it down on the green dot with a right turn into the grass.
Very good, Rock on that. Monitor tower now 118.5. Welcome to the show.
Clear to land on or after the green dot, right turn into the grass. Follow the flagman as per the note and welcome to Oshkosh.
Rock your way.
And welcome back. Like I said, and like the video said, we are here talking about SimVenture 2024, the virtual fly-in powered by Pilot Edge. Hello to Mike, to Reginald, to Nordic Aviator, to sorry, I'm going to mispronounce the name probably, but Oystein, I have no idea. But it's good to see all of you. If you're in the chat, feel free to tell us too if you're going to the real Oshkosh and if you're planning to do this fly-in in an actual airplane. Of course, for those of you who don't know, my name's Evan. I'm the co-founder of Flight Sim Association, host of today's live session. In just a moment, you'll hear from Kevin, the Director of Marketing and Special Projects at Pilot Edge, talking all about SimVenture and getting you all geared up for the fly-in. Now, for anyone who doesn't know, Pilot Edge is one of a couple of different online air traffic control providers. There's VATSIM, for example, there's IVAO, and then Pilot Edge is a little different because it is a paid service that guarantees 15 hours of coverage every single day, 7 days a week. So there's no guessing, is a controller online, whether you're going to have coverage at the end of your flight. You know exactly when Pilot Edge coverage will be, exactly where it will be. Again, that is a paid service, but one of the nice things about it is if you haven't used it before, you do get 5 hours in a free trial. So that means that if you've never flown on Pilot Edge, you can do SimVenture, you can get plenty of flights in, and you don't have to pay anything. And of course, hopefully, when you've created that account, you've had that experience, then Pilot Edge might be something that you start to add into your everyday flight sim routine. So just to be clear, this is definitely about Pilot Edge. One of the things that they do every year is this thing called SimVenture, which is a really cool experience where you get to fly into Oshkosh, you talk to the real Oshkosh controllers, the actual people who are doing the real thing, but you're doing it in flight sim. And it's such an amazing way to prepare yourself for the thrill and the experience of the actual fly-in, of course. And if you're not flying into the show, obviously what a cool thing to do in the simulator to just get some more experience and talk to the real people. Do it just about as close as you can, of course, except for being in an actual airplane. Now, SimVenture started in 2020. That makes this year the 5th annual SimVenture event. And this year also, there's over $5,000 worth of prizes that you can get. I guess everyone who flies into SimVenture is automatically added in to this prize draw. Kevin can speak a little more, I'm sure, to what some of those specific prizes are. So in today's session, Kevin is going to be walking you through the SimVenture notice, which is hot off the press, just came out a couple days ago, and you can download that notice and follow along at pilotedge.net/SimVenture. That's pilotedge.net/SimVenture. You can download the notice for X-Plane or Microsoft Flight Simulator. We'll have both of those available on the screen, but feel free to download that, follow along with us as we go, and that covers really everything that you need to know about flying in the event, and that's what we're going to be talking through today. Like I said, you don't necessarily have to be a Pilot Edge member. If you are, and you're all covered. But if you aren't a member, you've never used Pilot Edge before, you have access to that free trial. So when SimVenture goes live here in a couple of days, you can actually participate in this fly-in yourself. And of course, today's presentation hosted by us at Flight Sim Association. We exist to do stuff like this, just interesting, unique things that are happening between the world of real world and Flight Sim, and how can we bring some of those things together. So it is our privilege to be back hosting the SimVenture Notice Review once again this year, and I look forward to being along with you. I'll be monitoring all three of the chats on the Flight Sim Association website and our Discord on the Pilot Edge YouTube, and be answering any of your questions as we get going. I have to tell you, as we always do, everything we're covering today is for home flight simulation purposes only, so that legal disclaimer says you cannot use this and put it in a real airplane and think that it will work. But that being said, it is all based on the real world procedures, and I know plenty of people who will fly the SimVenture fly-in first, and then they will go to Oshkosh and they will do the real thing. And obviously, whenever we can give people more opportunities to practice and chair fly, the ultimate version of chair flying, of course, is Flight Sim. So like I said, if you have questions, you want to chat, I will be there in the Discord with you, and I'm also monitoring the YouTube channel. We've got Anthony from Pilot Edge keeping an eye on that too. By all means, please post your questions. I will throw those at Kevin as we go, as well as just saving everything that's kind of general for the end. But for now, I think I will pass things off to Kevin for us to get started with our notice review. So Kevin, thank you again so much for doing this with us for now I think it is third year in a row, and welcome in.
Thanks, Evan. What a great intro. Yes, absolutely. A very important disclaimer to this all is that, yes, this is just a notice review for SimVenture. Yes, our notice does mirror that of the real AirVenture. However, please use the actual AirVenture NOTAM when you're flying in there. Make sure you do review that, even though you'll find the procedures are near identical. We wouldn't want to lead you astray there. So, we're going to get started in just a minute. If you don't have a copy of the notice in hand, you can just go to Pilot Edge, the main website here, and there is a link for you to click here that'll take you to the page, and then you can select your simulator. We also cover Prepared and FSX as well if you're one of those users. And get to the notice that way. We do have 3 different versions of the notice for all 3 actually kind of all 4 simulator platforms, several of which are tied to each other. We're going to be covering the FS 2020 and X-Plane notices today, since those are the most widely used simulators. However, you'll find the Prepared and FSX ones are very similar. In case anyone needs a moment to get all that together, I will also just mention a few other great things happening this year for SimVenture. Our webinar series, you'll find information about that up here. After every day of SimVenture, all 4 days, there's going to be a webinar, and you can read about more information on that here on the right. So that's new this year. We're kind of giving you something to do after SimVenture, so similar to you fly into AirVenture, the real Oshkosh, and you have something to do there. Prizes, Evan talked about, we have over $5,000 worth of prizes made up of the sponsors, the very generous sponsors you see here. You can read up more about that as well. And last week, we got some awesome new merch, Oshkosh related. So if you are heading to the real show, you can be the dot. You can walk around and be your favorite color dot. We got some real cool shirts for you there, all available on pilotedge.net/SimVenture. The other last thing I'll say, if you downloaded the X-Plane scenery, for the X-Plane users, if you download the X-Plane scenery yesterday, that is July 4th, 4th July, please delete it and re-download it. It's not necessarily broken, but there is a chance that you could have an issue. So if you download it on the 4th of July, for X-Plane only, just delete it and re-download it. It'll just improve your stability. So with that said, let's get into this. As I said, I've got the 2 notices side by side. I'm just going to scroll through them both. By the way, notice is sponsored by 4Flight this year. 4Flight is also one of our prize sponsors, giving away a whole year subscription of their best, highest premium subscription service. So whether you're a real world pilot or a flight sim user, you can use 4Flight. It's a great tool. And it's got, thousands of tools there. So they will also be doing one of our webinars as well. So getting into this, I'm going to go quickly with the mindset that you can pause and rewind this, especially after the fact too. So if you have any questions, please drop them in the chat. Table of contents, pretty self-explanatory there. Just all this is clickable, by the way, too. So if you have an iPad or a laptop, it might be easier to use the notice on those types of devices, because you can just kind of click through this and it'll hyperlink to all the different sections. So some differences. This is important for the pilots who are going to be flying into AirVenture as well, or have flown at AirVenture in the past. You need to know what's different. And honestly, not a whole lot. But we do make that very transparent, so that if you are planning to go to AirVenture for the first time, you know what to expect differently. Again, not a whole lot. Little things like you have to use clear skies and 2992 on your altimeter for SimVenture. We just need everyone on that same weather setting, no wind, all that, to make everyone on the level playing field. No IFR is permitted. This is a completely VFR event. Obviously, you can fly an IFR if you have a slot into AirVenture. Let's see, no formation flights for SimVenture. They do allow them at AirVenture, though, per the notice. This is probably the most important, second most important one. No jets above 18,000 pounds maximum takeoff weight. I think it's around a Lear 35 is right around the cutoff there. We do have a link later in the notice that you can see if your intended jet that you want to fly is within that category. But no 737s, no Gulfstream 5s. This is, that's kind of defeats the purpose of the event. This is primarily for pistons, but if you do want to take a turboprop or even a small, very light jet out, that is okay, as long as it meets that parameters. And here's the most important one and the biggest difference. You have to file a VFR flight plan. This is just for our data tracking. It also helps all of you become eligible to win our Fly to Win contest, one of those $5,000 value prize pool. in order to track all the data and stuff, we do require that you file a flight plan before you start. So all that information is later on in the notice. All right, let's get into it. We got some definitions here. You can just kind of read up on what's what. Gets you a little bit familiar to what you're going to expect to see and hear and read in the notice as well. Overview, this just talks about what the event is, what, it's not a race. It says it right here. Don't try and get ahead of others. Be patient. Folks, please be patient. Please give yourself at least an hour or maybe two within the allotted 3 to 4 hour event window for that day. You don't want to be in a rush because that's not going to end well. It's just going to make you, it's going to make the event less fun for you because you're going to feel the pressure to get down. You don't want that. You need to be patient. There will be a long conga line of airplanes trying to get in. You have to wait your turn. And we have the ability, unlike the real world, to just boot people out if they're trying to cut in line. So if we do notice any malicious intent there, we will remove you from the event because there's no benefit to that for anyone. Even you're cheating yourself of that experience. So please give yourself plenty of time to fly this. Here's your link, your hyperlink, by the way, to the maximum takeoff weight restrictions to make sure that that your jet, if you choose to fly a jet, falls within that. Some simulator configurations there. I'm not going to go into that, but just please read that. That is very important to make sure your settings are set appropriately. Pre-flight. This is just all explaining what, and I'm going to kind of pause. I'll go into more detail when we get to the procedural part, but the pre-flight is all just talking about it says no IFR requests. There's no overlying TRACON or approach control. Just make sure you understand all that going in, that this is really just simulating the tower at Oshkosh and Fond du Lac. We'll get that later too. There's your VFR flight plan information. Check your radios before you depart. Please check those radios before you depart. You can do that via several methods. Here's one. Here, just do your self radio check. You don't want to get over FISC and realize you're hearing nothing, or maybe the controller asks you what runway you want and you have no way to talk back to them. So please make sure your radios are functioning to give yourself the best experience. Departing for Oshkosh. So this is basically just explaining that you anywhere outside of that yellow shaded area is outside of the everyday pilotage coverage area. Therefore, if you depart from St. Louis, for instance, you will not have any sort of services. It doesn't matter if it's during the SimVenture times. St. Louis is not within the pilotage coverage area. However, if you want to depart from, say, Denver, Colorado, or Denver Centennial, you can fly all the way up, but you're going to lose coverage around central Nebraska. You'll just be terminated. You'll just be a VFR pilot at that point on a 1200 code. Obviously, you don't have to fly a super long flight to get in, but some people do like to experience that little more realism factor there. So just kind of outlining for the first-time pilot edge users what you can expect if you are coming in from afar. Keep this in mind. This is really important. Avoid the class Delta, Oshkosh class Delta when you're approaching. So if you depart from, say, New York, to join the FISC arrival, you have to go west of the airport, which means you're basically going to be overflying Oshkosh. Please remain clear of the Delta and at or above 3,500. Okay, here we go. This is the real meat and potatoes, the FISC arrival. If you know anything about AirVenture, you've probably heard of the FISC arrival. This is the famous VFR arrival procedure, and honestly, this is the bread and butter of the whole event. So it is only for piston airplanes that can comfortably maintain 135 knots or less. So if you are flying a turboprop or a small jet, you will not fly the FISC arrival. So keep that in mind right off the bat. This is only for small piston. Only for piston aircraft who can comfortably maintain 135 knots. If you cannot go dirty on your airplane, put those flaps down, gear down, and keep 135 knots, then you need to look at the warbird arrival, which we'll talk about later. But assuming that you can comfortably maintain 135 knots, that includes gear down, flaps down, that would be considered comfortably maintaining. Then you need to fly the FISC arrival in your piston. Here's your checklist as you approach the Oshkosh area. Listen to the ATIS, get that done early, and there's a reason for that. We'll get to that a little later, but it'll tell you how to kind of set up for the approach or the arrival, FISC arrival. Let's see. Exterior lights are on. Keep your lights on. That allows the controllers to see you better and allows other traffic to see you better. Transponder should be set to altitude. That's mode C and squawking 1200. Altimeter 2992. Like I said before, everyone needs to be on level playing field with everything. and monitor Fisk approach on 120.7. Going back to this, by the way, do not use real world weather. That says it upper on those pages I kind of skimmed through, but do not use real world weather. Please set your sky to your sims to VFR skies and altimeter 2992. Monitor Fisk approach on 120.7. So this is the first control frequency you're going to monitor after having listened to the ATIS on 125.9. Again, you're going to be doing this about 50 to 60 miles outside of Oshkosh. Now, if you depart within that 50 to 60 mile range, just start monitoring right as you get airborne after you listen to the ATIS. General information. So this procedure, the Fisk arrival, starts at a published designated transition and requires visual navigation. Despite the GPS waypoints, you can certainly supplement with the GPS waypoints, but you're going to have to be navigating visually. This is a complete visual procedure. Pilots must follow the railroad track from Ripon to Fisk. We'll kind of get into what that looks like in a minute. And follow the aircraft in front of you, all that stuff. So approaching the starting transition point. Now, what is a transition point? Well, let's actually jump down here first, then we'll bounce back to that. Here's your 3 transition points that we have. Technically 4, but here the three main ones are in order of closest to farthest: Green Lake, Puckaway Lake, and Endeavor Bridge or Endeavor. Again, each one of these transitions has its own GPS waypoint, starting with a VP. That's how the FAA designates VFR waypoints now. So VP and then 3 letters. So you can find it in your GPS to supplement that. But again, you need to navigate visually. Use your GPS to just supplement your eyeballs. These are your 3 transitions you're going to be listening for in the ATIS. This is why you monitor the ATIS first. So you depart from wherever you're going or wherever you're coming from, and you get 60-ish miles out, or let's say you depart from within that 60-mile radius. You want to listen to this immediately, because you need to hear if they're currently using Green Lake, Puckaway Lake, or Endeavor, or potentially Ripon, but probably not. You're going to be listening for one of these 3 transitions. It's going to depend on how busy they are. If they're moderately busy, they'll use Green Lake. If they're a little more busy, they'll go Puckaway Lake. If they are super busy, they'll go back to Endeavor Bridge. So that's why it's so important to listen for the ATIS. You're also listening for which runways are in use, because that's going to be important to plan later. But honestly, the first thing you need to know is, where am I going to start this arrival? You hear that and you switch over to Fisk approach on 120.7. The reason you can do that is because if anything changes after that point, you will hear it by Fisk approach. You're going to hear Fisk approach just talking nonstop. And at some point, if you've listened to the ATIS and they say Green Lake and you're going for Green Lake, and then you've switched over to 120.7 Fisk approach, and they want to change it on you, you will hear them. Trust me, you will hear it a million times over. They will say, okay, now we're going to Puckaway. Everyone going to Puckaway Lake. And that's going to be your cue to go Puckaway. So if anything changes, they will let you know on that ATIS, on that 120.7. So knowing that transitions exist, well, let's go back here. Begin the procedure at the starting transition that we just covered. Approach your transition at 90 knots and 1,800 feet. Or if you're unable to maintain 90 knots, 135 knots and 2,300 feet. All right, these are very critical speeds and altitudes. Very, very critical speeds and altitudes. Use your autopilot if necessary. I fully recognize the sims are harder to fly at a lot of times than the real airplane. You don't have that inner ear telling you if you're going up or down or whatever it is. So if you need to use your autopilot, please do, because it is crucial that you are on speed and altitude. I recognize you're probably not going to have an auto throttle, so you're going to have to really to kind of tame that throttle. But at least your altitude, if you need to use it, please use the autopilot. If not, if you can do it on your own, great. But it's really imperative that you maintain that speed and altitude. So if you, and again, this high and fast stream, this is not for a Cessna 172 that's late for dinner with the wife. Again, like I said before, please allot yourself enough time for this event. You're gonna get called out if you're a Skyhawk on the high stream, and you're gonna get sent back. And if you don't get sent back, guess what? You're gonna get booted off. So don't try and cheat the system here. We want most airplanes on the low stream. It's only if you can't do it physically. For instance, like a Baron has a real hard time, even with full gear down and full flaps, have a real hard time maintaining that. So anyways, you're going to approach your transition. That's these at one of those, at one of these high or low stream. And at that point, you're going to start looking for an aircraft of similar in type, speed and altitude to follow. That will be, a similar type aircraft. Remain at least a half mile in trail behind the aircraft in front of you. Do not overtake the aircraft. Do not S-turn to follow the aircraft. If you are overtaking them, none of that. Going back a little bit to some of those other pages, we do need to maintain at least 20 frames per second. That is a requirement for this event. Usually Pilot Edge does not have that requirement every day, but this is a requirement for 20 frames per second. So make sure you're turning down your scenery as necessary to maintain that frame rate. The reason is, if you're familiar with how gaming works and how simulators work, if you're running at 10 frames per second, you are going slower than you should be. Essentially, your simulation is not 1x, it's maybe 0.5x or something. So therefore your 90 knots will look like 45 knots, and that's a problem because the guy behind you might have a sim running fine doing 90 knots, and you can kind of see where I'm getting at there. So you need to maintain that 20 frames per second. Make sure you're turning your settings down, your graphic settings, to hit that, and test it out ahead of time. So do not overtake anyone. Do not S-turn to follow another airplane, because if you S-turn, if you realize, oh, I'm too close to the guy in front of us, and you S-turn to build space, well, guess what? There might be a guy half mile in trail of you that you don't see, and that's going to bump him back too. So you can't S-turn. If you're too close to the guy in front of you, you got to turn, you got to break it off, go back to the starting point and try it again. Yes, this happens all the time at AirVenture. It's kind of a pain, but that's just the nature of the show. Founder and CEO of Pilot Edge, Keith Smith, I think his record is 3 times getting all the way to the airport or close to it and being sent back. So you got to be patient. And that's real world, by the way, real world Keith Smith experience at Oshkosh. Hopefully your experience isn't that tedious at SimVenture. Okay, so you approach your transition point, whether it's one of these 3, and you join the arrival. You're going to maintain your speed and altitude, whether you're on the high stream or the low stream. Again, most of you will be on the low. It's only if you can't fly the low that you are permitted to fly the high. You're going to hear stuff like start the arrival Green Lake. Again, the broadcast on the ATIS. And then here are the definitions of the transition points. You can kind of see them on the map here. The circles, obviously, they're at the southwesternmost tip of the lakes. And then Endeavor out here, there's a bridge you can kind of find. Again, you can use the GPS to find those points as well. Once you've located the point visually, please continue visually to hit the southern points of the lakes. That's the whole thing there. Stay on the very southern edge of the lake. It'll bring you into Ripon, and we'll get to that in a minute. So we got some explanations. I'm not going to read that to you. You can read that on your own as to how to get from point to point there on the arrival. All right, now inbound over Ripon. So I mentioned Ripon earlier. That's that kind of closest most point there to really kind of pick up on the Fisk arrival. Prior to 2000, I think it was 2021, Ripon was actually the starting point for everybody, but it was just too busy and they pushed it out to those new 3 transition points. But so now Ripon is kind of the real core start of the okay, buckle up, it's about to get real point. You're going to see Ripon. Now, the cool thing that these NOTAMs, I'm sorry, I'm dating myself. These notices used to be called a NOTAM. The cool thing these notices do that we put out is we have screenshots. So it shows you here what you're going to be seeing. And this is why we tell you, please use our notice. Don't use the real notice for this. Even though the procedures are the same, you're not going to have these types of screenshots, obviously. But this will really help you navigate, right? So you're approaching Ripon. It's going to look something like this. You're going to see this small lake. You're going to see the beginning of the railroad tracks here. This is the town of Ripon. You're going to see the railroad tracks run way up there. So X-plane looks very similar. There's the lake, there's the town, and then it runs up there, okay? It's got little notes. Follow these tracks. Don't follow the road. Follow the tracks, not the road. Little silos there too. So you approach Ripon. Again, we've got some notes here. Use full flaps. We talked about that if necessary, if you need to. Sequence yourself single file. Again, we're really stressing half mile and trail. Now let's talk about simulators. It can be difficult to spot traffic in the sim. It can be difficult to spot traffic in the real world too. But usually a half mile, you can see them pretty well. Beyond about a mile, you really start to lose that traffic. But if you're seeing that airplane as kind of a little dot in front of you, it's pretty safe to assume you're a half mile behind them, or maybe a 3/4 mile, but right in that good range there. Again, if everyone's doing the same speed, you should maintain that very easily. So it shouldn't be a lot of adjusting because hopefully everyone's doing 90 knots. Remain at least half mile on trail. Do not overtake. Do not S-turn. We stress that very heavily. If you are too close, please be an adult and break off the approach and rejoin the arrival. Sometimes you just have to kind of be be the bug, right? Sometimes it's a windshield bug. Sometimes you got to be the bug, and you gotta just go back to the start. If possible, lower your landing gear prior to approaching Fisk. This is twofold. Number one, it allows for the controllers to see you better, right? More airplane sticking out allows the controllers to visually see you better. Number two, it makes it so you don't gear up on the runway. Not only do the controllers not want you to gear up on the runway because of your safety, but it also shuts down the runway and it makes their lives a lot harder. So they want to make sure that everyone has their gear down to at least by Fisk, so that it's a checks and balances almost. It's like, okay, well, if they don't have it down by Fisk and somehow Fisk approach misses it, hopefully at least the tower will catch it. So it's just an extra set of eyes making sure you're going to be okay there. Some more visual reference points here. As you go down the tracks, you'll get about halfway between Ripon and Fisk, and you'll see the smokestacks. You'll see also where the road splits from the railroad tracks. Again, you are following the railroad tracks, not the road. Okay, so make sure you're following those train tracks. The road splits about roughly a mile and a half outside of Fisk. So these are also good reference points. Again, you can use your GPS to supplement, but these are good reference points to know how far you are outside of Fisk. This is very important. And by the way, this mile and a half point becomes incredibly important because you are in the zone where Fisk approach is going to start calling out to you. All this, let me go back up here. All this time, let me go way back. From Endeavor, Parkway, Green Lake, Ripon, all that, and then inbound over Ripon to Pickett, and that's about where we are here. Is Pickett next to Rush Lake. They will not talk to you directly unless you are in trouble. If you are cheating, if you are cutting someone off, if you are doing something bad, they will call out to you because since the ADSB era, they have the controllers. I'm talking real world, by the way, and obviously we simulate this for SimVenture. The controllers have an ADSB feed, so they can see who you are, and they will call out to you by your tail number. If you are more than a mile and a half outside of Fisk and they are talking to you, you're likely in trouble. So just stay on the tracks, stay on speed, and stay on altitude. Don't cut anyone off, and you'll be okay. But right when you get to this mile and a half point, this is where you really got to start listening up with your ears. All right, listen, because this is the point where ATC at Fisk can start seeing you. I wish I had a picture of what Fisk approach looks like. That would have been a good visual. Maybe I can bring one up later on my other screen. But so Fisk is going to start seeing you. And we've got videos, by the way, on the Pilot Edge YouTube channel of how this all works as far as real world and what the controllers do. There's some great interviews with some of the controllers who work this real world and also help us on SimVenture. And so I would highly encourage you afterwards to go check out those videos, that one specifically how Oshkosh ATC works on the Pilot Edge YouTube channel. Getting back here, so we approach Fisk. This is where you got to start listening up for your type and color. Yes, I said type and color. I did not say your tail number, because your tail number will rarely be used when you're flying in here. Again, only if you're kind of in trouble. Now, that's not to say if you hear your tail number, you're automatically in trouble. But what I'm saying is you need to listen for your type and color. Blue and red Cessna, rock your wings. Blue and red high wing. Keep in mind, they might call you high wing, low wing, Cessna, tail dragger. You have to know who you are, right? And I understand it's a sim, so it's a little bit different, right? It's not your own airplane. You're maybe not married to it like like you are the airplane, out at your hangar in the real world, that every little thing about it. They likely won't be going into as much detail in SimVenture as left wing landing light or wigwag landing light, but you will hear those things at AirVenture. But be familiar with your airplane. Be familiar with your type and color, and think about it. You get about half mile from Fisk. Let me go. Yeah, half mile from Fisk. This is the time. This is the most between about a mile and a half mile is the time you're going to hear them call out to you the most. So you're listening at this point. You're listening for yourself to be called. Let's just say we're a black and white Skyhawk. They'll say something like black and white Skyhawk over Fisk, or I'm sorry, black and white Skyhawk a half mile outside of Fisk, rock your wings. Okay, so hopefully you've all heard of the phrase rock your wings before. It is an Oshkosh, it's Oshkosh and Sun and Fun, but the purpose of it is that you don't talk. You do not talk. Most of you flying into AirVenture or SimVenture will not key up that push to talk. Now, you still need to be able to, in case there's a problem. You have to declare an emergency. You have a question. Never hesitate to ask a question. If you're unsure about something that that you were issued, but usually you keep that finger off the push talk. And so the wing rocks allow the controllers to know that you heard them. So what this looks like, we're approaching Fisk, black and white Skyhawk, rock your wings. We rock left and right. Now, when I say rock, I mean give it a good rock. Remember, they are a half mile to a mile from you. They're trying to see this little tiny Skyhawk up in the air. Sometimes since they're looking in the sun, make sure you're giving it a good rock. I'm talking 20, 30 degrees. Don't lose control of your airplane, but give it a good enough rock back and forth, left and right, or right and left to let them know, yep, I hear you. At that point, they're going to acknowledge your rock. They'll say something like, nice rock. I see that rock, whatever they might say. And here we go. They're going to give you now your runway transition point. So you can see two green lines branching off of Fisk. I've got Microsoft on the left, X-Plane on the right. The railroad track transition and the Fisk Avenue transition. I have a big red line here, not Fisk Avenue. This is commonly confused in the real world as well as Fisk Avenue. It is not. Fisk Avenue is the east-west road. You'll hear it referred to as the east-west road. It runs almost on a perfect 90 heading. It's like an 88 heading. But if you think you're following Fisk Avenue, but Fisk Avenue turns, you're not following Fisk Avenue. You should be on about almost exactly a 90 heading if you think you're following Fisk Avenue. So you're getting over Fisk here. They're going to tell you, continue up the tracks or make a right turn toward Fisk Avenue. Those are your 2 points here. At that point, you start, if they tell you Fisk Avenue, you make that turn and you're going to go right overhead Fisk Avenue. Technically, they actually want you just a hair south of it, north of the microwave tower, but no one's going to get mad if you directly overhead. Don't go north of it. So you're either going to get one of those transitions or you just keep going. You keep following the railroad tracks. And that one does make a little bend to the northeast here as it puts you toward the north side of the airport. So these are for runway 27 and 9 on the railroad tracks, or runway 3618 for the Fisk Avenue transition. Okay. So at that point, they're going to likely tell you monitor tower on whatever is appropriate frequency. Now, keep in mind, sometimes they might misspeak. So it's important that you are familiar with what those frequencies are. We'll get to those at the bottom of this page. Again, still stressing the half mile and trail, still stressing that speed and altitude. They are so important. Remain directly over the railroad tracks. Do not cut the corners. If the railroad track, let's go to an example. Here we go. The railroad track turns at Pickett. You can see it. It's about a 5-degree turn, if that. But they will be able to tell if you are not over those tracks because you will be the one out of line. You need to be directly over the head of railroad tracks. They should be directly underneath you. Do not cut that corner. Okay. Listen very carefully. Verbal readback's not required. We have talked about that with the wing rocks. But again, if you have a question, please key up, try to get that word in. It might be real busy, but it's better than just going rogue. We got some information on wing rocks here. You can read that on your own time. We talked about the transitions. Here's the runway tower frequencies. So you can have those ready. Typically when I fly in, I've got, I'm on 120.7 on COM 1 active, and maybe I've got 118.5 on COM 1 standby, and then on my COM 2, I've got 126.6 on my active but not on. That way I can just real quick hit COM 2 if I'm sent to the south runway, because you're not going to know. You're not going to know. They're going to tell you right overhead Fisk, and you have to react, which means you have to brief and be ready for both transitions. And you want to be ahead of the airplane at all times, right? So keep those frequencies at just a press of a button. This explains those transitions that we just discussed. Again, do not follow Highway 44. That's that curvy road that looks like Fisk Avenue. You're going to go due east to Fisk Avenue. I've got here about a 90 heading. This just explains those transitions, and you can just kind of read that. That's basically what I just said in a nutshell. Okay, let's get into holding. Full disclosure, we've never held at SimVenture. However, it is not out of the question, especially every year we're getting bigger and bigger. So we might have to hold. This is actually kind of a fun fact. This is the only change to the AirVenture notice, the real world notice. This is the only procedural change this year. And we've incorporated it into our SimVenture notice as well. And that is aircraft over Fisk will be instructed to turn westbound, remain single file north of the lakes, and return to the designated starting point. Basically, what that means is if you're over Fisk, and you need to be told to hold. Otherwise, they're just going to send you right back. Or actually, otherwise, you're going to go right back. There will be a lot of chatter, a lot of talking. If they do go into holding, they will start talking about if you are over X point, you need to go do this. But yes, they did add that provision. Aircraft over FISC will be instructed to turn westbound, remain single file north of the lakes. Again, north of the lakes, right? Because the inbound traffic is south of the lakes, and return to the designated transition to start it all over again. That's about all I'm going to say about holding, since, again, we haven't done it much, but still please be familiar with it because it absolutely could happen. Okay, that is the end of the FISC arrival. Let's talk about the turbine or warbird arrival. Don't think of warbird as you have to fly a P-51. This is just, well, it's actually named after Warbird Island, which we'll get to in a minute. But it is the turboprop and small jet arrival. So you cannot fly your Cessna 172 on the warbird arrival. Just because you're coming from the south or the southeast doesn't mean you get to fly the warbird arrival. No, it's all about what type of airplane you're flying. Number one, please be experienced if you're going to take a high-performing airplane into a SimVenture. This is not the time to bust out the King Air for the first time. Please be smart about that. If you frequently fly the King Air or the Citation, the small Citation, and you think, yeah, I'd like to, great, have fun. But if you're usually a Cessna 172 pilot and you just want to try it, please don't. Or you've got 5 days to prepare yourself. I guess 7 days to prepare, 6 days to I'll get it right. 6 days to prepare yourself at the time of this recording. So if you can get proficient within that 6 days, great. But please don't bite off more than you can chew. Okay, we talked about this earlier. You can only fly this if you're unable to FISC arrival. We've got that provision for the jets, the maximum takeoff weight again. Here we go. So again, listen to the ATIS. Now this arrival is very, very different. And the biggest difference is that you talk. If you have mic fright, don't jump in that warbird arrival. I say that jokingly, but you're going to talk. So first and foremost, you still monitor the ATIS. That's going to tell you the runway in use. Obviously, the transition point, the starting transition on the FISC arrival is meaningless to you for the warbird arrival. So you can ignore that. But what is important is the runway in use because, we'll get to that in a minute. Number one, avoid Fond du Lac airspace. So we'll get to this in a minute. Fond du Lac is usually an uncontrolled airport that is temporarily towered for AirVenture or SimVenture in this case. So avoid that airspace, number one. Now, if you're departing Fond du Lac, a little bit different, but you still need to kind of climb up and above Fond du Lac airspace to get on the warbird arrival. It defines what the airspace is there. And aircraft weighing more than 12.5 must advise ATC on initial contact. That's really for parking reasons, so they know kind of how to park you. But so it's going to sound something like this. So two-way radio communications are required. All aircraft shall report to Oshkosh Tower when over the city of Fond du Lac, and again over Warbird Island. Again, Warbird Island. That's why this is named Warbird Arrival. It's not because you have to be a warbird to fly it. And this is really important, and this is why you got to listen to that ATIS. Well, not the only reason, but probably the most critical from ATC's perspective. Because the ATIS, the runway in use, is going to dictate which frequency you call. So if 36 left and right are in use for arrivals, you report on 126.6. You're going to report inbound. If not, basically, if anything, if 36 left and right are not being used for arrivals, whether it's 27s being used, 9s being used, 18s being used, if you're not hearing 36 left and right are being used for arrivals, then you report an 18.5 instead. Okay, so that's how that works. Examples of your report. You're not going to use your N number. You're going to use your type and color. So Oshkosh Tower, black and red, King Air, Fond du Lac. It's super simple. No altitude. This is very non-standard from what you're usually used to. But black and red, Oshkosh Tower, black and red, King Air, Fond du Lac. And then you get over, they'll acknowledge you, and they'll likely say report Warbird Island, or maybe they'll tell you to hold. You're going to adapt to whatever they tell you. But you get over Warbird, and that point, black and red King Air, Warbird Island, or white TBM, Warbird Island, whatever you are, right? At that point over Warbird, they're going to give you an instruction, whether it's hold over Warbird for a sequence, maybe or hopefully you'll get your pattern entry at that point. So enter, right base, runway 36 right, report, 2 mile final, whatever it is. At that point, it becomes very kind of more class Delta-ish, like you're used to. This just has some more definitions in there. Stay alert for other airplanes. And it's got some information here. There was some information about, here you go, the speeds. So you're going to obviously, the graphic kind of tells you what to do, but 2,800 feet, 250 knots or less. So obviously don't exceed that 250. You shouldn't anyways. Once you get beyond Fond du Lac's airspace, you can descend to 2,800 to cross Warbird Island. This has holding instructions in case you are instructed to hold at Warbird as well. Use caution. Oshkosh departures will be restricted at or below 1,300. So watch out. I would recommend staying 1,400 or above until you're established on that final to make sure you're clear of those clear of those departures. Being familiar with the departure pattern will also help you here. So landing and approach. This all talks about your final approach into Oshkosh. So it's got all these different runways. So you're going to reference these for whatever runway is in use at that time. So for instance, if 9 and 27, well, 9 and 27 wouldn't be at both means. If 9 and 18 right are in use for landing, then you're going to need to be familiar with both of these basically while you're on the Fisk arrival or the Warbird, so you know how you're going to do that. I'm not going to go over all these. It's pretty self-explanatory graphically. But you can ignore the IFR stuff too. It says IFR arrivals. These are just copy and pasted from EAA's notice for the actual show. What is really important though, please, please, please read all the text on these with regard to the runway you're going to be using. The most important is the runway exit instructions. Please read those. I'm not going to go over them. I'm not just going to read them to you, but please read those because knowing how to exit the runway is very important for the entire event to work. The controller may instruct you how to exit the runway, but in the event they don't, know how you're supposed to exit the runway. By the way, it is not 90-degree right turns off onto hard surface. It is angle off into the grass. That's number one for most of them. 3-6 right, you're going to taxi all the way down to the end. But again, that's all textual in here. Please read it. Taxi for okay, and then now we get into the flagmen. Let's hold that thought on the flagmen. I'll show you the flagmen later. Okay, again, more runway approach stuff. Please be familiar with this approaching the airport and make sure you know how you're going to exit the runway. It also has some go around instructions as well. If ATC does not give you any other instructions, or if you can't get a word in and you need to go around for safety, please do so and just be familiar with those no instruction from ATC go around procedures prior to approaching the airport. Again, a lot of stuff to brief here, but that's how this event all works, both SimVenture and real world. Okay, VFR departure from Oshkosh. So again, I said before, especially on that Warbird arrival, but it's also helpful for the Fisk arrival. Be familiar with how airplanes are leaving Oshkosh. You might actually be one of the ones who depart Oshkosh during the event as well, because that will help you stay safer on the arrival. So let's assume you have loaded up at Oshkosh, or maybe you've taxied to the ramp, you've watched some airplanes, now you're ready to leave, or you just need a bathroom break, whatever it is. So you are starting at one of these two starting locations. Those are the only spawn spots if you were to load up at Oshkosh in our scenery. These are also our designated parking areas if you land and want to taxi to parking. You'll see all that signed in the scenery itself. If you're beginning from Oshkosh, listen to the ATIS. Again, all this starts with the ATIS, right? And then there is no ground control. So you listen to ATIS, and you want to then tune to the tower frequency for the runway which you will be departing. And those frequencies are down here. They're different than the landing arrival frequencies. So if the ATIS says you're departing 36 left or 18 left or right, you're going to tune this frequency, 18.9. If ATIS says you're departing from 27 or 9, you'll tune 128.75. At that point, you will begin your taxi on your own. Again, there is no ground control. There's no one to call for taxi. Now, real world AirVenture, there will be flagmen to point you in the direction at which you need a taxi. SimVenture, we have dynamic flagmen. That means the flagmen will pop in and out of your sim as necessary to point you toward the departure runway. This is very important. Flagmen will always point you toward the departure runway. When you land, backing up a little bit, back up a page or two, when you land at Oshkosh, you will follow the flagmen until you see signs for parking, and then you will follow the signs and turn into parking. Okay, that's assuming you want to go to parking. Now, if you land and you want to just depart right back out, great. Just keep following those flagmen all the way. They'll take you right to departure runway every single time. But if you land and your intention is to stop at Oshkosh and stay there for a minute or two, or bathroom break, whatever, go to parking, pull off, you need to follow the flagmen until you see the signs for parking. And if you, for some reason, miss those and you find yourself at a departure runway, probably just want to log off and figure it out where you went wrong. But you know where you're supposed to park. You've got these two locations here. You will pass by this one if you land 927. You will pass by this one if you land 3618. So keep that in mind. So you're taxiing out for takeoff, and you follow those flagmen. You approach the runway. You're already tuned that tower frequency, right? Because you did that right after you heard the ATIS and learned which runway is in use. You're not going to key up. You're going to wait for them to call you. They'll say something like, "Red Skyhawk, line up wait on the left side of the center line." They will sometimes line up two airplanes on each side of the runway, so keep that in mind. Obviously, a very non-standard procedure. Or they'll maybe just flat out clear of takeoff. Again, no response is necessary. You don't rock your wings because you're on the ground. But they will obviously see you move, and that's how they'll know at that point that you heard them, right? If they say Red Skyhawk, line up wait, or clear for takeoff, they'll see that you are moving your airplane, and they'll know that you heard them. I think that does for that. They might use your end number as well because they are literally on the ground. Those departure controllers, those tower controllers controlling the departures are literally on the ground right next to the hold short line. So they're looking right at you. They may even call you, Four Eyes if you have glasses or something. That was a joke. They're not going to make fun of you, but just know that they might use your end number and you're not in trouble. I know I mentioned jokingly earlier you might be in trouble if you hear your end number. Okay, just some distance remaining information for you there. Here, this is a very important page. It shows you all the departure instructions from each runway. Be familiar with that, please. This is copy and pasted from the AirVenture notice. So be familiar with all these headings and instructions after departure. Okay, pretty self-explanatory briefing item there. Helicopters. We do allow helicopters. However, they don't talk to ATC. If you are an avid helicopter user, by all means, if you want to fly the helicopter arrival, go for it. But you're likely not going to talk to anyone. If you do end up being talked to or talking to ATC, something has gone wrong. You've likely messed something up. We do not allow tours, the tour route around the AirVenture grounds. We do not allow that. If you see helicopters flying around the AirVenture grounds, SimVenture grounds, they are either being flown by Pilot Edge staff members or they are pre-recorded drones just to add that value and that fun visual reference into the sim. But if you want to fly to and from the airport with a helicopter, the procedures are right here. Fond du Lac, talked about that earlier. Usually a non-towered airport, but it is temporarily towered for SimVenture and AirVenture. It is basically a normal class Delta. Think of it as a normal class D. You will call tower and ground as necessary. You will listen to the ATIS. There are typically no wing rocks. If they get really busy, they might, but usually you're going to be just two-way ready communications like your normal class Delta. So treat this like a very normal class D. And there's not a whole lot else I have to say there. I would hope that you know how to fly into and out of a class Delta. If not, you've got 6 days to learn. Use Pilot Edge with the CAT ratings. Okay, seaplane base, similar to the helicopters, you don't talk to ATC. If you are, something has gone wrong. We do allow it. If you choose to fly to the seaplane base, just follow these procedures, and you will do so successfully. Again, we don't see many of that, so I'm not going to go into that much. Here's the flagmen. Aren't they cute? Left, straight, and right. So these are the three flagmen you're going to see on the grounds at SimVenture. Some of them are baked into the scenery. So if you've already taken a look at the scenery, you may have seen some of them. Those are the ones that basically work for all flows. The dynamic ones are the ones that are flow specific that we will inject based upon the flow. Okay. So there's some more information about that you can read up there, but those are who you're going to look for there. Turn left, go straight, turn right. Pretty self-explanatory. Moving map applications, again, I'm just kind of skimming through this at this point because it's really just stuff you can read and set up on your own. But I would highly recommend some sort of moving map, whether it's an iPad or on your phone, or even like FS 2020. You can get it on the VFR map within the sim. X-Plane, you can use ForeFlight. Aero Nav Map is a cool iOS app. Pilot Edge Live Map is a complete last resort. You can just have that up, map.pilotedge.net. It'll give you some sort of reference as to where you are, reference other traffic. TCAS should work if you have a TCAS display within your sim. but that'll just help you maintain your situational awareness a lot better, especially in the sim where it can be a little bit difficult to spot traffic. But overwhelmingly, throughout the last 4 years of doing this, uh, you guys have been great. All the pilots have been real good with it. We do have some progressive taxi instructions. This is a bit of a spoiler alert. If you don't want to see it, close your eyes. But just in the event that you do get lost with those flagmen, you can look up our progressive taxi routes here. So keep that in mind. If you are just not doing a great job following the flagmen, if you're completely lost, just head to page 30, and this will kind of bail you out of that situation, hopefully. Some FAQs at the bottom. It's self-explanatory, and we've made it through to the end. So thank you for your patience with all that, and I hope you found this useful. I'll turn it back over to Evan and to see if we got any questions throughout. And yeah, thanks for listening.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Kevin. Great presentation and lots of good detail. I mean, I've seen this a couple times now, but it's always interesting and things do change year after year, and you always make it exciting and interesting every time. Looks like it's going to be a ton of fun, both to do in the sim and, of course, to do in real life. I mean, if you haven't seen this show and this sort of experience in real life before, I mean, it's just crazy. Like they're landing 3 or 4 people on the same runway at the same time. It's wild. So lots of great comments came through, and if anyone does have any questions for Kevin, I've got a couple queued up already, but now would be a great time. Please put them in the chat wherever you're watching. I'm keeping an eye on those, as is Anthony, and we will definitely share your questions with Kevin and get those answered. So please do share any questions that you have. But a couple of good comments from Mike, and by the way, Mike, if you're watching, I'm looking at your mouse pad design that we did last year, so thanks again for that. But Mike says, one of my favorite events of the year. James says, I'll be attending Oshkosh again and SimVenture, flying in from KSEE. I think that's Gillespie in California. Always a great time at Oshkosh. Loved SimVenture last year. And just a few minutes here, Milkman556 on the Pilot Edge YouTube says, this is awesome. I go to EAA every year. This will be the first as a PPL. Congrats on that, by the way. And can't wait to fly this in Pilot Edge. So good to see a lot of engaging, good discussion. And please do share any questions that you have. I'll get into a couple with you, Kevin, here. And starting with one from Rob, who asks, is it possible to log in just to listen and kind of watch the first day rather than having to just jump in and fly it?
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. You can certainly just log on and hop on the ground. What I would recommend above that though is find a streamer. There will inevitably be people on Twitch.tv. You may or may not be familiar with what that is, but just twich.tv. It's a website. It's almost like YouTube, but it's all pretty much for live streaming of simulators and games. And so Twitch.tv, you can log on there, just maybe search Pilot Edge on that day. We might even, the Pilot Edge social medias might even blast out a few who are doing it. That would honestly be a lot more fun and beneficial in my opinion. But you are welcome to load up on the airfield grounds and just tune the radio as well. You can do that. So whatever's best for you there. But the streamers are always great. It's always a lot of fun to follow them, especially the great personality ones.
Perfect. 923 Romeo Kilo just asked if you can go over the hours of SimVenture. When can people fly in it? What are the schedule? What's the
Yes,
the
so
dates?
all that information is on pilotedge.net/SimVenture. Again, if you just go to pilotedge.net, there's a big SimVenture logo here. Just left click that. And then right here, this table, it's all in Pacific time. So mind that, please. And then we can, that will take care of that.
Perfect. I put that link on the screen there for you as well. Question from Milkman556 on the Pilot Edge YouTube. Can you speak to what Pilot Edge is doing at the show? Like I know previous years we've had the Pilot Proficiency Center thing going on. Is that still happening, or what else is Pilot Edge doing at the show, if anything, at the real
So
show?
no official booth presence. I believe Keith is slotted to go out there. Anthony will be there as well. Anthony's the director of pilot services for Pilot Edge, so you can find him walking around. He'll have all his Pilot Edge swag on.
Nice.
And then yeah, with the PPC, I would need to check. Honestly, I'm not certain if they are going to be doing any official scenarios this year at the PPC. Although we are still working really closely with them and over at Community Aviation as well.
Very nice, very nice. And the question was also about Flight Sim Association. We did Sun and Fun, we did another air show, we had Flight Sim Expo, so we won't be officially at Oshkosh, but I know plenty of FSA members, just even in the chat here, who will be attending. So hopefully you guys can meet up or do something at the show. And if I manage to make it, at this point I don't know, but if I do manage to make it, I will definitely let people know about that. Question from Reginald, any major differences in the scenery between this year and last year?
Just some sponsorship changes, and also I should say some sponsorship additions, and just some beefing up of the scenery. It is important everyone is using the same scenery, especially we do have a few taxi flow changes. So yes, please do get that new scenery in your sim for whatever flight simulator platform you're using. However, Prepared and FSX has not changed. So if you are on Prepared and FSX and you flew with us last year, you're good.
Very nice. Mark in the FSA website says first time simmer and air venturer here, so welcome Mark. Asks about runway 18 right. The notice instructs us to turn base by the blue dot, but also to be prepared to land on the blue dot, and kind of hard to do both. So do you have any suggestions on when you would start the base turn and kind of at which point, like based on I guess which point the tower might instruct them to land on?
Yeah, so I don't think you're going to get the blue dot to land. If you're still here in chat, you can tell me where you may have seen that. I can't say I've ever seen that. Usually, the blue dot is used as an aiming point, um, at least with this procedure. The reason that you can't go north of the blue dot or the control tower is just because they've got runway 27 and 9 operations going on up there, so they don't want you to stray over there. They may, if they really do need you on the blue dot, they may allow you to extend ever so slightly as they can coordinate in the tower with the other side of the airfield and see if there's any other conflicting traffic up there. But generally, you're going to plan for the pink or the yellow dots there. That is a tight approach. That is by far the most challenging approach at AirVenture and SimVenture, because as a tight turn to final, this is basically all one turn, and you're still going to be winged down about 50 feet off the ground. It's a fun one to fly, but you got to be on your game.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mark is in the chat, so Mark, if that didn't answer your question or if you wanted to clarify anything, feel free and I'll definitely voice that in. And just to follow up from them as well, for a microphone and headset, is like ear pods are okay? Is like anything specifically recommended versus another, or do we just need to be able to basically communicate in two ways?
Ideally, a computer headset, like a USB headset, is best. If that's what we prefer all Pilot Edge users to be using because of quality reasons. But you certainly do need a way to communicate with ATC. Webcam mics are notoriously bad, or
Yeah.
built-in mics. So you can just go grab a really inexpensive USB headset out at Target for $20, and that's going to be all you need.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. And a question from Richard: where do we find the link for those post-show webinars that you were talking about?
So the links will, so that table right here, they will turn into links as it gets closer. So just keep an eye on that table. This Pilot / SimVenture page is the core for this entire event. And this is being actively updated.
Perfect. And just a couple of questions for me out of interest, if you don't mind, and then I think we'll probably wrap things up. But just how many pilots or people kind of participate in SimVenture typically? And then can you speak a little bit to how you get the real world controllers kind of in Pilot Edge? Because I'm assuming that it's a little different for them working off a computer screen than just looking outside.
Yeah, so we had over 2,000 arrivals last year,
It's awesome.
and it's been going up every year. I think the first year we only had about 1,000, but we were really excited about that, and it continues to grow, and we're real happy with the amount of support we're getting from both sponsors and EAA and NACA and everything. Speaking of NACA, that's the National Air Traffic Control Association. That's the union for the controllers. That is where our controllers kind of come from. Essentially, NACA is our contact. And they're the ones who help get us the controllers. The fact of the matter is the controllers love doing this. They're doing this, for those unfamiliar, they don't work at Oshkosh. 51 weeks out of the year, they are at a tower somewhere else in the country. And for that 1 week out of the year, they all go up to Oshkosh and work the show. It is a volunteer, you have to be selected to do it. But they're all going up there voluntarily. And so that means they all love it. They're not being forced to go because they love it. They also love doing it with us. And so it's an honor to work with them and to have them do the thing with Pilot Edge and SimVenture alike.
Nice. And hey, just sorry, one last one from Nunzio about Pilot Edge generally, which I appreciate you may not be able to answer, but I'll throw it at you anyway. Any talk or plans to expand Pilot Edge to the East Coast or anywhere outside of the kind of traditional coverage areas that you've heard about?
Yeah, Keith is always looking at other opportunities to do that. There's a lot that goes into that. You gotta know that the quality of the ATC coverage, and to be able to build out that airspace and to build those procedures is not something that can happen quickly. Everything is data that comes from the FAA via FOIA requests. So that is a process that takes years to make sure that we get it right. There's we can't just build an airspace overnight. Even building little Oshkosh area, which is realistically just about a 10-mile radius of active airport ATC, that took months. So it takes a long time, and I know Keith is actively looking at at other areas.
Perfect. Kevin, well, thank you so much for being on with us, and
Thank
again
you,
for
Evan.
working with us on this SimVenture notice review for I think it is third or fourth year in a row. It's been a ton of fun working with you and being able to answer some of these questions. And look, one of the things that we're really trying to work on here at Flight Sim Association is to just support the intersection between flight sim and real flying. So to see EAA and ForeFlight and some of those names that are synonymous with real world aviation paying attention to flight sim, that's a big deal for us. I mean, obviously that's something that we really strive for at Flight Sim Expo and in any number of the other things that we do, like the Sun and Fun thing we did earlier this year. So that's awesome to see. So big thanks to Kevin and Anthony for helping us moderate in the chat. And if this isn't necessarily your thing, online ATC is a great way to just add to your simulation experience. So if you've never tried VATSIM, Pilot Edge, IVEO, some kind of a live air traffic control service, or now the new Say Intentions one, which is an artificial intelligence-based option, it's a really cool thing to be able to actually speak to, in the case of VATSIM, Pilot Edge, or IVEO, a real human controller. So definitely something to consider if it's not through SimVenture. Maybe this helps inspire you to get involved with online aviation in another way. And then just to wrap things up, for those of you who were at Flight Sim Expo this past year, we are going through your survey results probably starting next week. So you did get a link if you came to the show. Please take a few minutes to fill out the survey. At last check, there were over 300 people who had done that, so thank you for that. And Phil and I will be with you on August 7th. We decided to move this a couple weeks just to give people a little more time to fill out the survey and give us some time to look through it. But in our now annual tradition of hosting the event debrief webinar, Phil and I will literally walk through with you the survey results, see what you had to say about some of those interesting hot take questions that we asked, like the length of Friday and whether or not you might want to see the show in Canada. So we'll be covering all of those things, asking and answering your questions live on stream. So you can go ahead and register for that over at flightsimiassociation.com/webinars. So as we wrap things up today, Kevin had hinted at this little video on the Pilot Edge YouTube channel that covers a little bit more about how the real Oshkosh air traffic control works. So we have that video teed up and ready to go for you. So I will leave you with that. We are back live on August the 7th. You can register for that webinar over at flightsimiassociation.com/webinars. You can support us by becoming a Flight Sim Association captain on our website. And on behalf of Kevin, Anthony, myself, thank you so much for being here with us. Have a great time at SimVenture, and for anyone who's going, have an even better time at the real thing. That's all from me for now. Have a great night.
Right behind me, the most visible thing on property is the control tower. Let me tell you something, when you plug in up there, it is the most amazing feeling you can ever have as an air traffic controller. Let me tell you how this tower works. Upstairs, there are 2 teams of 4 controllers, and the tower is split in half. That side of the tower up there, those windows, belong to the team that's responsible for 1836, and then the team that's over here for 927 is on this tower, this side of the tower. You have a rookie, typically 2 veterans and a team lead, and each portion of the windows is 1 guy. So the person here talking on radio is getting input from about 5 people, including all 3 of your team members and maybe a supervisor that's standing behind the team ensuring the safety. Now explain to me how you teach your team to work 3-6, which are these windows over here. Go.
Okay, working 3-6. We tell everybody to go to the little runway as much as we can because we want to let airplanes depart off the big runway. If we have to go to the big, we space them down on the dots. We use the purple dot and the yellow dot on 3-6.
That's right. So interestingly enough, when we talked about how each person has a second quadrant of from Fisk, you're already starting to be looked at. And then when you get to the base, and then that's where the base leg spotter, and then sometimes the person talking on the radio, and then you as a team lead or me as a team lead would say we're going to the big runway or we go to the skinny runway, and then we start selecting dots. What also makes 3-6 challenging is the warbird arrival.
Yes.
Very challenging. Warbird arrival is really kind of nutty. So sometimes you're crossing bases.
Warbirds come and they break overhead to the right, and everything is going opposite base to the left.
That's right.
And they have to cross out there on the base. It's real fun.
But that's 3-6. And what do you like about 2-7, Jeff?
I love 2.7 because your downwind is right there where you can see it. You can pull your base in tight. You have this very tight control on your arrival.
That's right. So we put the two spotters, one coming up the railroad tracks to the downwind. You have a guy on downwind, so you call it downwind spotter. So if you were to listen and go, high wind, start your downwind, that's the downwind spotter yelling to the communicator who's on frequency. He just simply repeats it, because the communicator is responsible for the runway and picking the dots and figuring out there's also a base leg spotter. What I found difficult about 2.7 is the RNAV final for 2.7 is really kind of, that's driving straight in. The warbirds come up the lake.
Warbirds are on the left base.
That's right. And then you
Fisk is on the right, downwind right base. It's really fun out there a mile from the runway.
It is
as they turn
absolutely complicated, but it's for the right individuals who are sick in the head like he and I, that was probably the most fun you'll ever have in air traffic. Now, I will tell you that 99% of the time it's 2.736 here, but on occasion it's 1.8, and that gets kind of nutty. But 9 gets really, really sporty.
Sucks.
Yep. So if you're on runway 9 at Oshkosh, rest assured, none of the controllers wearing pink shirts are enjoying that.
We're not happy about that.
It happens way too fast.
And why is that? Because everybody's come up the rail tracks from Fisk, and then the RNF straight in. So everybody's converging at about a mile final.
And you lose them, right? About a quarter-mile final, you lose them behind the trees.
That's right.
And you don't know what's happening.
Right behind us is Fisk. Now, interesting enough, it's IFR. Take a look. There's not a thing going around.
It's solid. 500-foot overcast.
That's right. So nobody's flying today. There's usually a team parked right there at the table between us. You see them right behind with the glasses.
It's just a microphone.
It's all IFR. The tower grabs all this airspace, and because there's nobody flying in here, there's no reason anybody to be here. But if you've flown into Fisk before, you'll realize that the in the tower, in a thing here now with ADSB, he's got an actual raw radar feed, so he sees exactly what the radar is.
He's got your N number. He knows who you are.
That's right. He knows everything. And also have a display that he puts in the trailer back here that has the ground radar, so you can see exactly what the ground is doing. The way this operates here is there's somebody talking to Mike, and then there's a spotter. And what they do is they look up the line, which is right behind here. Let's spin around. We'll take a look. And basically what you do is you'll hear them say, hey, aircraft a half a mile south of Fisk.
And right there's the railroad track sign. The bottom of the hill is the railroad tracks that everybody follows.
That's right. So now you're looking up the railroad tracks, so you can see from toward Ripon if you look at the chart. And see these two phone lines up here, those two right there? That is what we use for a spot to determine when you're half mile south of Fisk. Right. So as the airplane comes up and they go between those two wires, I always teach the rookies to make sure that's about half a mile south of Fisk. Rock your wings. It's a great location. And then what they'll do is they'll either spit you out to one direction or back up continue up the railroad track for 2.7 or over to 3.618. And also, if you come out here and you're visiting Fisk, you can pop a lawn chair right over here and you can sit there and watch. It's probably one of the best kept secrets of
Bring yourself
Oshkosh.
some spotted cow and a lawn chair, and it's a great afternoon.
Yep. And right there is runway 27. Right there. Now right behind us, look there, right over Joel's bald head, is called a moo cow. And the pink shirt controllers up there, they're working departures. So all the departures you see right there, you'll see them. The two guys up there, one is in communication with the tower, the other is actually talking to the pilots. But this is how it works. These guys clear for takeoff. Right off there, you'll see a couple in position. Now, if there's somebody coming in to land, they are watching for the final. So if somebody's landing, they'll stop the chain and another guy will land and they'll start departing again. It's super intense. This is probably one of the best positions to work at Oshkosh, I can tell you right now, because the downwind, the final, and the warbirds all come from the approach end, and meanwhile you're just talking departures. The spotter up there, and then the guy communicating, they work as a team. The spacing right here, the separation is only 1,500 feet, which is not normal. We're under a waiver that allows us to shorten up the spacing. There's a couple guys hold short lines with wands, so when they would say controllers don't use wands, well guess what, we have to learn to use the wand. And that's one of the things we always joke about when we were always controlling over here. Now we're here over at 3.618. Hey, if you look way over there, you'll see another moo cow. That's called flyby. Same kind of concept we talked about over there on the other side for 2.7. You have somebody up on the moo cow who's in constant communication with the tower. That's probably the coolest tower ever.
The world's busiest control tower.
That's right, this week. You have somebody talking. And then you have somebody on the trailer. Her name is Kathy tonight. She is amazing. Love Kathy. We'll talk about the arrival. But this is the runway right here. We went around. Moo cow right there was the one that put somebody in front of us. It happens. That's the safety features of Oshkosh. Is we're always backstopping. So if you misjudge something, there's a boatload of people there to help you out.